Topping today's news, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force officers and Marines welcome their new Commodore. We hear from the Prime Minister on China, Cuba, Haiti, and firearms trafficking, and the Bahamas taking more steps to control its own airspace, in addition to the opposition leader saying that he is ready for the general elections whenever it is called. This is your JCN Evening News. I'm Jarino Saunders. Thank you so much for joining us. His tenure as Commodore of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force came to an end on April 15th, and today Dr. Raymond King officially passed the torch to Captain Floyd Moxey during an elaborate ceremony at the Coral Harbor base. Prime Minister Philip Davis said, well, he described the occasion as deeply significant as it represents a gesture of trust, continuity, and a shared responsibility in a country made up of small islands and big challenges. He praised Dr. King for his service as commander in charge.
Today, we pay tribute to Commodore Raymond King, a man who, over the course of his command, faced circumstances no leader would have chosen. The aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, the shock of a global pandemic, and a growing tide of transnational crime in our region. In quieter times, a commander may be able to plan carefully, to respond methodically. Commodore King had no such luxury. He had to act decisively, practically, with limited resources and under pressure. And he did so with clarity, intelligence, and restraint.
In his final address, Dr. King thanked a number of people and institutions that he has worked with during his tenure, including the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Immigration Department, and the Prison Department. In his first address as new Commodore, Chief Captain Moxey says he is ready to lead the Royal Bahamas Defense Force into its next chapter, and he's both honored and humbled to be chosen for such an important position in his country.
To accept the responsibility of leading the Royal Bahamas Defense Force into its next chapter. It is with a profound sense of duty and a deep appreciation for the legacy laid by those before me that I stand here today. We are all stewards in our time, called to build upon the sacrifices and achievement of those who came before us. I am but one link in a long and unbroken chain of service, bound together by the commitment, discipline, and sacrifice of those who served before me. To the former Commodores, senior officers, mentors, and all those named and unnamed, who have shaped both the legacy of this force and my own professional journey, I extend my sincerest respect.
The new Commodore says a force led by him will be modern, resilient, and forward-looking. Former Prime Ministers Hubert Ingraham, Perry Christie, and Dr. Hubert Minnis were also in attendance. 2 days after Prime Minister Philip Davis spoke strongly but respectfully to the U.S. officials about unfairness in the way the world treats our financial services sector, good news for the Bahamas as France announcing it has removed the Bahamas off the list of non-cooperative states and territories in tax matters. It was initially published on April 18th and marks another significant achievement in a series of international tax compliance victories for the Bahamas. It follows the country's earlier removals from other prominent blacklists, including those issued by the European Union and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD. These removals affirm the Bahamas' commitment to strong governance, fiscal cooperation, and regulatory alignment with global norms. The United States is one of our closest neighbors and by far the most powerful neighbor we have. And there is no secret that the U.S. has been at odds with both China and Cuba for many decades now. And now the Bahamas seems to be caught in the middle, something the government says it wants no part of. During his visit to the United States to meet with high-level officials, including U.S. Secretary of State Senator Marco Rubio, who urged America's Caribbean partners to make responsible, transparent decisions when selecting vendors and contractors for critical infrastructure projects, ensuring they are not vulnerable to privacy and security risks and exploitation by malign actors like the Chinese Communist Party. In recent times, the U.S. has expressed concerns that there is a growing Chinese influence in the Bahamas. Prime Minister Davis said this issue was on the table for discussion and they tried to iron things out with the United States.
Something to do with, breaching, privacy and setting up other security matters that will serve China's interests. But each of the leaders there assured the United States we will be vigilant in anything that crosses the diplomatic line, as we call it, and so we're not able to explain that to them, and just let's say this issue of China, the concerns about China, just didn't arise. It arose with me in 2022 under the previous administration. The issue of the Cuban nurses just didn't arise today either or now. It was again raised in 2022. And I had to address both of those at the Summit of America in Los Angeles. And if you could find my contribution to that, you'll see what I had to say in respect to both of those.
According to Ambassador Wendell Jones, the Prime Minister explained to the U.S. that China has been forthcoming with acceptable loans to help the Bahamas in its development, while the U.S. has not been as forthcoming. Meanwhile, as it relates to the U.S. concerns on the issue of Cuban labor in the Bahamas, the Prime Minister shared the following about what was said in those meetings.
What the Secretary affirmed was that any country that is engaged in forced labor, they would have a policy of restricting visas to officials in that country. But the question is whether you are engaged in forced labor, and that we were able to say to them, and I think they were satisfied, that we are not engaged in forced labor that we are aware of. So if forced labor is occurring in our country with the Cubans, there's no evidence that we have come across. Now, what we are doing now, what we've been doing in the last several weeks, is to identify what I call ingredients of forced labor, to see whether any of those are present in relation to any of the workers here in the Bahamas. And if we discover that, that will be corrected.
The government of the Bahamas also asking U.S. officials to share any intelligence or evidence they may have on Cuban forced labor so that proper actions can be taken here in the Bahamas. And finally in the segment, it is an advancement for the Bahamas Department of Meteorology. Wednesday, a heads of agreement was signed for the Caribbean's first next-generation meteorological watch office with the Bahamas Aviation, Climate, and Severe Weather Network. Minister of Energy and Transport, Jobeth Kobe Davis, says that the initiative will bring about real-time flight tracking and enhanced reporting to meteorological conditions affecting the Bahamas.
Further, this partnership will strengthen the reputation of our aviation industry, an important enabler of our country's economic growth through tourism. By partnering with Baxwin, a Bahamian company with strong global relationships, we not only believe that the Bahamas Department of Meteorology will be significantly transformed, but that the country as a whole will benefit.
Prime Minister Philip Davis said that over the past 20 years, air traffic through our islands has increased significantly. He said that growth brings with it the responsibility to ensure aviation safety.
This is about more than new equipment or modern tools. It is about transforming a critical public institution, the Department of Meteorology, into one that is not only more effective, but more financially sustainable. One that continues to serve the public interest while opening the door to new partnerships, revenue streams, and regional leadership.
More than $400 million over 3 years is expected to come out of this. The process should take about 6 months to a year to complete. You're watching JCN TV News. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back following these commercials.